Welcome to the Perinatal Wellness Podcast, a space dedicated to supporting your mental and emotional well-being through pregnancy and early parenthood. I'm Courtney Schroeder, a licensed therapist, perinatal mental health specialist, and fellow mom. If you are looking for practical tools, helpful guidance, and meaningful conversations to help you feel like yourself again and find more presence and joy in this season of life, you are in the right place. Now let's get into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Perinatal Wellness Podcast. I am so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much for choosing to spend this time with me today. Today, we're going to be talking all about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. But before we get into that, I thought because this is the first episode, I just wanted to take a few minutes to introduce myself briefly before we get started here. So I'm Courtney. I'm a licensed social worker in the state of Michigan. I am a certified perinatal mental health professional, and I primarily work with folks during the season of life surrounding trying to conceive, pregnancy, labor and delivery, the postpartum period, and early parenthood. And I've had an interest in working with this population for quite a while, well before I actually became a mom myself. And then a few years ago, my wonderful son was born, and my experience of bringing him into the world was different from what I expected in a lot of ways. It challenged me in many ways, taught me so many lessons, and I really felt like that was kind of an initiation, not just into a new version of myself as a mom, but also into a new version of myself as a therapist. And it really confirmed to me that serving the perinatal population in my work was really important to me, which is how I came to specialize in this area over the last couple of years. And I have really been wanting to start this podcast for a while. I am so passionate about sharing information and providing resources that are easily accessible to everyone. So if you are listening to this, that means I finally started the podcast, and I hope you will get a lot out of today's episode and the episodes to come. So for this first episode today, I wanted to start with a topic that would feel really foundational to the podcast itself. So we're going to be talking about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And I actually had the opportunity to give a continuing education course through the University of Michigan on this topic several months ago, and wanted to share some of the information that I covered there. So in this episode, we'll be discussing what perinatal mood and anxiety disorders are, how to recognize them, and why they happen, the risk factors and the causes. And then in the next episode, we're going to go deeper into what do we do about them, how do we treat them, and I'll be giving steps that you can take to improve your mental health during this time period as well. So let's say you are pregnant or newly postpartum, for example, and you're having some mental health symptoms, but you aren't really sure what's maybe quote unquote normal for this time or what to do about it. This episode is definitely for you. Or maybe you work with this population and you want to be more educated on this topic. Maybe you're a therapist also, or a nurse, or a doula. This episode is also going to be for you. And even if you maybe have a loved one who seems different after having a baby, and you're suspecting that maybe they're depressed, but you're not really sure what to look for or what to do about it, this is also going to have a lot of information that can apply to you as well. So let's begin by defining what perinatal mood and anxiety disorders are and discuss why they're so important to talk about. I'll also be referring to them as PMADs for short because it can be a little bit of a mouthful. So the first term, perinatal, refers to the period from preconception through a year after delivery. And so this can also include a loss during this period as well, such as a miscarriage or infant loss. So the term perinatal can include the process of getting pregnant, the pregnancy itself, the postpartum period up to a year, and any loss along the way. So if you or someone you love falls within this perinatal time frame, research actually shows us that PMADs are the most common complication of childbearing. And it's estimated that up to 1 in 5 to 7 women depending on the study, will experience a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder, and 1 in 10 fathers will experience postpartum depression too. So that's why this is so important for us to be educated about and talking about and thinking about what we can do about this. So under this PMADs umbrella, then, we have 7 different mental health conditions that are encapsulated in this term, which include depression, bipolar disorder and psychosis, and generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, these mental health conditions are not just specific or unique to the perinatal period or population, but there is an increased likelihood for them during this time. And often when we think and talk about mental health issues that come up during the major life transition of having a child, historically the term postpartum depression has been commonly used. And postpartum depression is a real condition that deserves to be recognized and properly treated, but it only refers to one condition out of 7, depression, and only refers to the postpartum period. So when we're discussing mental health around the perinatal period more broadly, we're moving away from just using the term postpartum depression and towards using the term perinatal mood and anxiety disorders because it encapsulates a larger number of mental health conditions over a longer period of time. So it's more comprehensive. And if somebody is in the postpartum period and they are primarily having depression symptoms, then yes, that term postpartum depression is still definitely appropriate and can be used. So you may be wondering, how do I know if I have a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder? Well, each of these 7 conditions is going to have their own criteria that needs to be fulfilled to meet a full diagnosis. And since this episode is going to give more of a high-level overview, I want to talk about some of the broader, more common symptoms we might look for with PMADs. And I want to note that even if you don't think you would necessarily meet full criteria for a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder, but you're still experiencing symptoms and you know you want to feel different and you want something to change, you're still worthy of getting the help you need to. So here are some of the most common signs of PMADs. And as you listen to them, you'll notice that with a number of them in some capacity, they're kind of a standard part of the process of being pregnant or welcoming a new child. So we're going to also be discussing at what point are some of these symptoms just kind of part of the typical adjustment to a big life change, and at what point do they kind of tip into being a bit more severe or more of a sign of a mental health condition. So the first symptom, crying and sadness. Some of this, of course, is going to be expected. This is a big life change, and during the first 2 weeks after delivery, we often see something called the baby blues, and this can include crying more, feeling more overwhelmed, and this is due to hormone changes, sleep deprivation. It usually peaks around 3 to 5 days after delivery. So this is often when milk is coming in, folks are adjusting to life at home. And so there's a lot of factors going into the baby blues, but it's very common. So with crying and sadness, we're really looking at what is it looking like over time, especially beyond this 2-week period. Is it tapering off a little bit? Is it getting worse? If we're seeing that this is kind of sticking around longer than this baby blues period, that may be more of a sign of depression or some sort of perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. The next symptom is excessive worrying and racing thoughts. And worrying happens for many of us during this time. It's often part of the process, right? You have this little being that you're now caring for, or during pregnancy, it can feel like there are so many things to be worrying about. So we're taking something that we really care about and putting a lot of newness and uncertainty around it, and that can be a recipe for anxiety for a lot of us. But what we're looking for is it excessive? Is it getting in the way of you functioning? in the way of sleep? Is it beyond what you have the ability to cope with? These are the things we're going to be looking for when it comes to worrying and racing thoughts. And third, if we're noticing other intense emotions like anger, rage, irritability, guilt, shame, or hopelessness, again, to a degree that it's really getting in the way of our functioning, that may be a sign of PMADs. Number 4 is intrusive thoughts and images. So intrusive thoughts, or having really unsettling images or scenarios popping in your head, maybe of you doing something or something happening to you or your child or a loved one, things that you don't want to do and that you don't want to have happen, are incredibly common during this time. So, for example, a common intrusive thought that a lot of people have is driving on the highway and thinking, what if I just swerved off of the road and crashed my car? Many people have had that thought. It doesn't mean that you want to do that or that you plan on doing it, but it just kind of pops in your head. And maybe you say, that's kind of an odd thought, and then just continue on with your drive. But for some people, it might feel really hard to let go of that thought, or they might wonder, what does this mean about me? Or does this mean that I actually want to do this? And then it might lead to behavior changes. For example, not driving as often. And so when it comes to intrusive thoughts during the perinatal period, if these kinds of thoughts are really getting in the way or are changing your behavior or impacting your ability to parent or do things that you value, live the life that you want to live, that would also be a reason to look further into this as maybe a sign of a mental health condition. Number 5, a loss of interest or pleasure in things that you used to enjoy. So simply put, no longer looking forward to things that you used to get a lot of enjoyment out of. So number 6, we're going to be looking at sleep disturbances not related to the baby waking up, or maybe discomfort associated with pregnancy. For example, postpartum, if you are given the opportunity to sleep, maybe your baby is asleep, are you able to rest? Or are you feeling too worried or wired to be able to fall asleep? This one, of course, is a little bit tricky, right? Because we know that sleep disturbances are going to come during this period, but that's kind of the key difference is when you do have the opportunity to sleep, are you actually able to get that rest that you need, or is something standing in the way? Number 7 is changes in appetite. And again, this one can be a little bit tricky because we would expect for many of us to feel more hungry during pregnancy or if we're breastfeeding. And so if we're experiencing maybe a sudden change or maybe a decrease in appetite when we would expect to feel more hungry, those could be signs that there's potentially a mental health condition impacting our appetite. And if at any point you're having a change in appetite that feels outside of the range of what feels right for your body or what you would expect for your body during whatever phase of the perinatal period you're in, that can absolutely be reason to follow up with your doctor and discuss it further. And then number 8, thoughts of harming the baby or yourself are going to be potential signs of a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder. And if you're having this, following up with a doctor as soon as possible is very important. So those are some of the main symptoms we're going to look for with PMADs. But what causes them, and why do some people get them and some people don't? Well, we know that PMADs can impact anyone regardless of age, race, or income level. And it's not that you're weak, that you aren't cut out for parenthood, or that it's your fault. The reality is there are certain risk factors, and the more of them you have, the more likely you are to experience a mental health condition during this time. So let's see what the research tells us about these risk factors. We're going to look at the biological risk factors and then the psychosocial ones. So first, with biological risk factors, you can probably guess that one of the major ones at play here is hormone changes. Increased estrogen, progesterone, and cortisol the onset of oxytocin and prolactin at birth. There is so much going on hormonally during this time. And your existing sensitivity to hormone changes will influence how much of a risk factor this is for you personally. So if you think about how your mental health is impacted around PMS or your period, or maybe how you respond to hormonal birth controls, or maybe even how you felt during puberty. If you are somebody who historically has been maybe more emotionally impacted by these hormone changes, it's likely you would also see the same be the case during these hormonal changes as well. Another note with hormone changes is that abruptly ending breastfeeding can cause a really dramatic shift in hormones, and this can have a big impact emotionally and also induce symptoms of depression. So if you are somebody who is maybe planning to be done breastfeeding, just keeping in mind that if you are ending abruptly, that can be tied with a higher likelihood of experiencing some mental health issues as a result. Endocrine dysfunction is another risk factor, so thyroid imbalance, diabetes, PCOS, and of course, a lack of sleep is a major biological risk factor too. So whether it's pregnancy insomnia or staying up with your baby, it's no secret that this time period comes with major changes to our sleep that can have a significant impact on our mental health and well-being. And when it comes to psychosocial risk factors, there are a number of things that can increase our likelihood of having a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder. So, an unplanned or an unwanted pregnancy, and nearly half of pregnancies are unplanned. Complications during pregnancy or delivery, or having infertility or pregnancy or infant loss. Having health challenges for your baby or your baby staying in the NICU. Having a traumatic birth experience can be a risk factor for PMADs. Having severe nausea and sickness during pregnancy. Having a history of mood or anxiety disorders, and that can be for you personally or just within your family. If there's a history of abuse, that is also a risk factor. And we know that experiences during this time, such as medical experiences, can be especially triggering if someone has a history of sexual abuse as well. A history of adverse childhood experiences is a risk factor. Relationship stress or lack of support from family or friends, financial stress, systemic racism and prolonged discrimination, barriers to adequate care. And there could be a number of reasons for this, but things like stigma or having a lack of medical coverage can be a few factors that might influence this. A recent loss or life transition, so maybe changes at work or at home or something along those lines. And I think something else that I want to mention that I've just seen in my own work that tends to make this time period harder is feeling a pressure to suppress or not express negative emotions during this time, or feeling like it's not okay to be honest about the challenges of this period, because there are many wonderful and beautiful things about it and a lot of challenging things about it. And when we feel like we can't find a space to be honest and open about that without having those feelings being minimized or maybe dismissed, that can be really isolating and just make the journey so much more difficult. And something I tend to think about a lot regarding mental health issues during the perinatal period is unmet needs. And there are so many different needs that we have during this time. Needs for rest, for social connection, for proper education, and knowing that we're being guided through the process by compassionate and trusted sources and professionals. We have different nutritional needs, medical needs, just to name a few. So this is a time when we have so many important needs. And in my own work, something that I come back to again and again with my clients is an exploration of unmet needs that are underneath mental health symptoms, because mental health symptoms are signals and they're trying to tell us something important. So the reality is that many of our needs during the perinatal period often go unmet for a number of reasons. Maybe we're struggling financially and we can't get the care that we need. Maybe we don't really connect with our doctor or feel safe speaking up. Maybe we don't have a supportive partner or are a single parent or don't have help from family. Maybe we're just unable to catch a break and get rest, or maybe we're low in certain vitamins or nutrients that we're not even aware of. There are so many different reasons that we might have needs that are going unmet. So, as we're thinking about symptoms of mental health issues that parents may experience during this time, when we think about it in this context, that this is a period where we have many needs that are often going unacknowledged and unmet, it can make the increase of mental health issues during this time make more sense. So, if you're resonating with this episode today and you think maybe you have a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder, or someone you love might have one, please know that there absolutely is hope. And there are a number of treatment options and changes that you can make in your day-to-day life that do help. So, in the next episode, we're going to do a deep dive into how to address and treat these mental health conditions. So, please stay tuned for that. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, please consider sharing it with a friend. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.